All right, everybody, welcome back to day two of Who Gets to Live and Who Gets to Die, brought to you by about 600 politicians in Washington, D.C. Currently, the GOP and the Democrats are negotiating back and forth on a bill, a second coronavirus bailout bill, such as it is. And each party, each group is trying to determine, who's deserving enough to get some kind of assistance for the second time in 5 months and who isn't, and essentially who gets to fall below the line and then either starve or become homeless, or who gets just enough government assistance to stay afloat so that they can keep buying things and paying bills and funding all the people who fund the politicians. Yeah, kind of like that. So essentially, it's a giant negotiation that's going on, um, and it kind of looks and sounds uh, like that. Yeah, that's the negotiation right now. However, a couple of very interesting things have popped up during the negotiation. And of course, as usual, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a story. We're going to look at the stuff on the surface, and then I'm going to show you the stinky, festering, horrid part of the news that's laying just underneath the surface of that article, because there's always that layer to be found. It's 2020. We live in America under the Trump regime. Literally nothing is as bad as it seems. It's always somehow worse. So let's take a look at what's going on. All right, here's the negotiation. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer set to continue coronavirus relief talks with Trump today after Senate Republicans put out their opening offer for pandemic aid on Monday. Parties appear far apart on issues including unemployment insurance, aid for state and local governments, and assistance for renters and homeowners. Leaders have not given firm deadlines for negotiations. Unfortunately, most landlords out there definitely have firm deadlines for when you have to pay the rent. However, not a single person in the Senate or in Congress worries about paying rent because they all own homes. So, it's cool. They have time. You don't, but they do. Um, Senate Republicans released their coronavirus relief package. GOP leaders and White House officials have to bridge a gulf between priorities and the goals of top Democrats during talks in the coming days. Democrats sounded less than hopeful about where the bill stands. Unfortunately, we're pretty far apart right now, although I'm optimistic we could have a good solution in the end, Schumer said. Asked if the sides could reach a deal before the end of next week, he said, "I hope so, and that's what we're looking for. We'll sit down. We're going to sit down again. Today, we'll sit down 24/7, because Lord knows nobody knows how to sit down like members of the House." Congress faces pressure to approve more aid, as any delays will hold back assistance to jobless Americans after states stopped paying out the $600 per week federal unemployment benefit. Federal eviction moratorium also expired. States are trying to process a flurry of COVID-19 tests during a nationwide surge, and schools are struggling to plan how to open safely in the fall. And I believe the House goes on another recess in another week because, as we covered in a previous broadcast, members of Congress make about $185,000 a year. Members of the Senate make about $200,000 a year, and they both only work 135 days a year. So, it's really tough getting all that work done when you only work one out of every 3 days. Must be nice. I'd like to have a job where I only have to work 2 days a week and get paid $200,000 a year. But, nobody in my family has an incestuous relationship with a current politician or has any bribe dirt on a corporate CEO, so probably not going to happen. I'm just going to get back to reading stuff now. Some GOP lawmakers have expressed concerns about more federal spending to buoy the economy after Congress allocated more than $2.5 trillion to combat the pandemic earlier this year. And as we've already reviewed, $1 trillion of that was sent in $1,200 checks to people who then signed it, gave it to their landlords, who then signed it, gave it to their banks. So $1 trillion of that $2.5 trillion was essentially laundered through the working class into the banks. And out of the other $1.5 trillion, another $700 billion of that was in PPP loans that got taken by Catholic churches and corporations like Shake Shack, some of whom gave it back. Some said, nah, I'm just going to keep it. I'm looking at you, Kanye. Yeah, Yeezy took money. Yeah, I know you did. Senator Pat Toomey told CNBC Republicans are going to be divided on this one even before Pelosi earns concessions in talks with the Trump administration. I imagine it's probably going to be another week or two, he said. So here are the points of contention. Republican package released Monday as a series of smaller bills would cut the unemployment benefit from $600 to $200 a week, on top of state unemployment. A lot of states have already run out of unemployment. A lot of people have now been unemployed for 5 months. And in most states, 20 weeks is about the maximum you can collect unemployment. So the vast majority of people who are unemployed and drawing state unemployment are not going to be drawing state unemployment for much longer, if not any longer. It would then set the assistance at 70% of a worker's previous wages with a cap of $500 per week. Democrats have warned outdated state unemployment systems can't handle replacing a percentage of wages, which would delay critical assistance for the roughly 30 million people getting some form of unemployment insurance. They've called to extend the $600 per week benefit into next year and potentially phase it out as state unemployment rates fall. On top of the unemployment change, the GOP proposal would send another direct payment of up to $1,200 to individuals and $2,400 to couples. The Republican legislation includes liability protections for businesses, doctors, and schools, with the except for cases of gross negligence, quote, or willful misconduct, which means what you can do and what you can prove in court are two entirely different things. Smaller businesses, fewer than 300 employees, who lost more than 50% of their revenue, could also apply for another PPP loan, which is going to chuck out another $105 billion. Would also put $26 billion towards development of COVID-19 vaccines and therapeutics, and send $16 billion to states to help them boost testing capacity. A lot of it sounds mildly reasonable. You know, Republicans have constituents too, and it is an election year. Let's see what the Democrats want. They passed a $3 trillion relief package, which includes more relief funds for cash crunch state and local governments, money to assist renters, and a moratorium on evictions, and a strengthened supplemental nutrition assistance program benefit plan to help families afford food. So the Democrats are focusing on food and rent. The Republicans are focusing on legal liability and corporations. That sounds remarkably on brand. The GOP proposal would not authorize any new aid. Instead, it would give states and municipalities more flexibility in how to spend relief funds. The House legislation would put $175 billion towards rent, mortgage, and utility assistance, and would boost SNAP benefits by 15%. As lawmakers try to resolve a bevy of issues and pass coronavirus relief before they potentially leave for an abbreviated August recess, both Pelosi and Schumer stressed they would not put a deadline on reaching a deal. No, of course not. Why would we put a deadline on a deal? The two of us are worth $78 million. We're good. We don't have to worry about paying our rent or buying food. So we'll get it done when we get it done. Now, here's something weird that came up in that bill. And if you didn't catch it, don't feel bad because I didn't catch it at first either. GOP coronavirus bill includes $1.75 billion for construction of a new FBI building. That doesn't sound very coronavirus-y, but okay. Coronavirus relief package unveiled on Monday includes nearly $2 billion in funding for the Department of Justice to construct a new FBI building. It was tucked into a 177-page appropriation sections of the package. Would pay for design and construction of a Washington, D.C. headquarters facility for the FBI. The decision to include funding for a new FBI building in Washington, D.C. comes as the Trump administration has pushed to keep the new headquarters in Washington, D.C. Before the Trump administration, the new headquarters was expected to be built in a D.C. suburb. Republicans distanced themselves from the inclusion of the money in their coronavirus relief package. What? $2 billion for an FBI building? I have no idea what you're talking about. What? Huh? What? Asked about it at first, Mitch McConnell questioned if the funding was even in the bill. A staff member then indicated that it was. Asked a second time about the funding, the GOP Senate leader told reporters to ask the administration why they instituted that be included. Regarding that proposal, obviously, we had to have an agreement with the administration in order to get started, and they'll have to answer the question of why they insisted on that provision. Asked about the FBI funding, Shelby noted it was the administration's request. That's a good question, Shelby added. Asked how the FBI building funding was related to the coronavirus. There's probably a lot of things you might have to stretch and wink some of them. The DOJ Inspector General said last year it would probe the decision to keep the FBI headquartered in Washington. So I went and looked at this, and it turns out this FBI thing has been a whole fucking odyssey. Now I'm going to put you in the time machine real quick. I take you back to 2019 when Trump attacked his own FBI director after defending the report, finding no anti-Trump plot. President Donald Trump blasted his own hand-picked FBI director Christopher Wray after he defended the core findings of the Justice Department's Inspector General report regarding Russiagate. Trump actually said, I don't know what current director of FBI Christopher Wray was reading, but it sure wasn't the one given to me. With that kind of attitude, he will never be able to fix the FBI, which is badly broken, despite having some of the greatest men and women working there. Now, keep in mind that Christopher Wray was appointed by Donald Trump in 2017. He's literally his FBI director. And also, the greatest men and women working there, I feel like we need to go further back into the time machine. Let's see. Trump calls FBI investigators in Russia probe human scum. President Trump lashed out at FBI leadership over the origins of the investigation into Russia's election interference, calling investigators who led the probe human scum. Trump made the remarks during a White House press briefing, after being asked about a pair of his former associates who were sentenced to prison following charges stemming from former special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. Called the FBI human scum, he called his own FBI director incompetent and unable to rebuild the horrible FBI. So why the hell is Trump trying to give the FBI $1.75 billion? Turns out this isn't the first time he's done it. Back in 2018, Trump proposed giving money to the FBI. I believe he stuck it in his infrastructure bill he wanted. White House is proposing sending more than $2 billion in funding for a new FBI headquarters, infusing cash into a stalled effort to replace the downtown Washington building. The allocation, which would have had to have been approved by Congress, comes tucked inside President Donald Trump's new infrastructure proposal and amid a war Trump is waging against the law enforcement agency's top officials. So Trump spends years calling the FBI the corrupt deep state for the whole Russia investigation, appoints his own FBI director, who he then calls incompetent, calls the investigators at the FBI human scum. He then tries to spend $2 billion to buy them a new headquarters and sneak it into an infrastructure bill, which didn't pass. And then in 2019, there was actually an AG report on it because there was a whole bunch of chicanery. Yeah, I busted out an SAT word there. The FBI said it had submitted a report to the Senate on a naturally focused consolidation strategy for the FBI headquarters that recommended the construction of a new building on the Bureau's current site on Pennsylvania Avenue. As part of the report's proposal, the FBI would relocate operations and personnel from the facility as construction was underway. So originally, this was not the FBI's plan. This was the FBI's plan. For more than a decade, the FBI sought funding from Congress to move its headquarters from the J. Edgar Hoover building, which is in downtown D.C., to the suburbs, and it would have freed up prime downtown real estate in D.C. So when the Trump administration canceled the project in 2017, and then 7 months later announced plans to rebuild at the same site, people asked questions. In summer of 2018, Donald Trump was personally involved in the decision. The Inspector General of the GSA found. GSA Administrator Emily Murphy may have misled Congress earlier in the year when they had a hearing about this. The Inspector General report also mentioned 3 meetings between the General Services Administration and the current Trump regime. They met in 2017, February of 18, and then June of 18. All three times, they discussed what they were going to do with the FBI building. It turns out the FBI building is a block away from Trump's hotel. 1 block away. And if the J. Edgar Hoover building moved to Annapolis, Maryland, or Manassas, Virginia, the Trump Hotel would lose thousands of annual bookings. Plus, if that land came up, a wealthy real estate developer could buy that land and put another hotel directly across the street from the Trump International Hotel. And if you know anything about Trump hotels, they gold plate them when they buy them, and then they let them run to shit because Donald Trump doesn't believe in reinvesting. He just bails, declares bankruptcy, and then sues everybody. So Trump's aging hotel gets a certain portion of its business every year from visitors to the FBI. Losing those FBI bookings, combined with potentially having competition across the street and a nicer hotel that's actually built by somebody who actually has both money and taste, could very well wipe out Donald Trump's downtown DC hotel. Oh, so that's why you want to give them $2 billion of taxpayer money. Woo! That is one of the Trumpiest things I've heard in a while, and I hear Trumpy shit every day. Everybody, we are cursed to live in interesting times. We live under the Trump regime. It is 2020. We do not have flying cars. Basically, we just have a president who's giving away billions of dollars of our money so that he can keep renting out shabby hotel rooms at a premium. Well played. Well played.